right, 1 Samuel 22. Once again, let's call this one Homeless King, but this time subtitle it Insecurities in the Cave. Because this time, David's period of bouncing around from place to place, sleeping rough, is going to land him in a literal cave where he is going to seek shelter. But at this point, after a number of chapters in David's life where he is insecure, one, about why he is going through this situation, and two, having to move past the whys to just the insecurities of how am I going to make it through this situation. He's now in a cave, and God is going to begin to make it a little bit more clear why he is going through this. When it is going to say in verse 2, and everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him, and he became captain over them. And they were with him about 400 men. It's just the men, because in the next chapter, we're going to see some of these men had families, and we don't necessarily know how many had gathered to him. And so now we are starting to see that God has brought his king through this period of insecurity so that he may now be a source of comfort to people in Israel who are likewise dealing with some form of insecurity. Doesn't necessarily say like Saul. When Saul became popular, every time he saw a powerful or a strong man, that's who he snatched up for his army. David's army is being built by those who, much like we'll see in the life of Jesus, he simply extends the offer to whosoever will, not necessarily on their own terms, but whosoever will make the most of the next legitimate opportunity that God is giving them. And in this cave, God is providing David an opportunity to find the love of people who can understand what he is going through. He's also going to be reunited to his family. So any bitterness that Eliab, his oldest brother, or anybody else might have had, now that they've heard all that David has had to endure, whatever the source of the friction was, is now beginning to be put behind them as they come to David at the cave too. And David's going to not only be looking out for his own best interest, now he's got people to look out for. And so just as he is in danger, he wants to make sure his family is safe too. And so he takes his family to a place where he believes they will be safe while he is on the run from Saul. And likewise, he is now going to be the captain of this group of people who, like we said before, have suffered quite a bit too. But that's not going to be the end of it, because like we said, David is not the perfect homeless king. He is the homeless king. And in the last chapter, he made some mistakes that we're going to see attract consequences in this chapter, as the priest Ahimelech, the man to whom he lied in order to get bread and a sword, is now going to have to answer to Saul, even though he didn't necessarily know he was doing wrong or helping David in any kind of ill cause. And so when Saul calls him to account, he's not going to be happy with Ahimelech's answer, because Ahimelech is not going to be able to see past the injustice of the situation. Even though David lied to him, that's not what he's going to use to save his life. He's going to wonder, Saul, why are you doing this to somebody who has proven himself to be so loyal to you over and over again? Ahimelech not focusing on the lie that David told to him, simply wondering why. Saul, on the other hand, is unable to see the injustice in the circumstance, because once again, we mentioned that Saul was stuck in a place where he was too sensitive to see David succeed, and that's why David has ended up at this point. But David is not going to be content to simply point the finger at Saul, because at the end of this chapter, he is going to have to see face to face the only priest to survive Saul's vengeance, and he's going to say, it's my fault, but stay with me, because the man who is seeking your life is seeking my life too, and you'll be safe here. And so David makes a choice that even though he is in a bad situation, he is now going to commit to do the most that he can with the situation he has in front of him. And in that way, he is going to begin to set an example for a whole band of people who are now trying to find a way out of their current situations. So in this chapter, we get a chance to see those times where God begins to bring clarity to our situation. And beyond clarity, he begins to give us a new opportunity, which is why we often say God's best to you as you go forward in him. God willing, whether or not he is using your period of adversity to get you ready to lead people who are hurting in the same way, or whether or not he is simply preparing you for people who can empathize with your circumstance to come along and extend to you a new opportunity. My prayer for you is my prayer for me, that we make the most of those opportunities God is bringing our way to get out of sleeping rough, whether it's literally or simply a space in our life where we know we just be doing.